Hello and welcome to IGPP Expert Talks. I am Heena Goswami, Editorial Consultant with IGPP, Institute for Governance, Policies and Politics, New Delhi. The escalating tensions between India and China have preoccupied analysts for some time now, and there seems no end in sight. To discuss India-China relation, disagreements and conflicts, we have with us Dr. Rajiv Ranjan. Dr. Rajiv Ranjan teaches Chinese politics and foreign policy at Department of East Asian Studies, University of Delhi. Previously, he taught international politics at the College of Liberal Arts, Shanghai University, China. Dr. Ranjan is also an adjunct fellow at Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. Welcome to IGPP Expert
Thank you,
Talks,
Heenaji,
sir.
for having me.
So, China's president skipped the G20 summit hosted by New Delhi, and there was much confusion about the bilateral meeting that was held between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping at the sidelines of the BRICS summit on who invited who for the talk. So, is there a crisis of diplomacy in India-China relation?
Yeah, for sure, there is a crisis between India-China relationship since Galwan that we have seen 20 of Indian soldiers were martyred, right? So from there onwards, the kind of like India-China relationship is going downhill. We haven't have a kind of like a very cordial relationship. There is like kind of like both sides trying to kind of trying to disengage from the border area, but at least that is not kind of like successful. On going to like BRICS summit in Johannesburg, we had seen this meeting at military level to try to disengage, but even that was not successful. Now coming to your question about like who invited whom, I think it's like becoming a kind of like, I think Chinese have this template. Whenever there is a meeting between the Xi meets with the world leaders, I think the Chinese media comes with that on the invitation of the former Xi Jinping met with someone. I think this is a very kind of ready-made template. And then I think our foreign ministry has kind of like clarified that no, it's not. It was on the request of Chinese side that both our prime minister and Chinese president have met. So I would say that it's a kind of like, because if you look at the Chinese foreign policy recently, there is a kind of like a sense of pride have come up in Chinese foreign policy or Chinese people, whereby they believe that it's someone is requesting you to like meet, and she is like kind of like becoming a kind of like they want to like treated at par with the US president like John Biden. So whenever he goes, like there is like kind of, okay, look at the body language, you have to look at the body language. Even the protocol is like, sometimes if you look at how the Chinese prior to this any meeting, there was a report that the Chinese diplomats like take care of every details about like who will come forward, how to click a picture. And so you will, if you look at the Chinese president handshaking some of the world leaders, you will see that the other leaders hand is reaching towards the president, so showing that you were reaching to the Chinese president. So it's a kind of like, I think the Chinese are like minutely detailing about this protocol, and also like trying to show that what the Chinese would say, that the Chinese have become stronger. This is the kind of slogan that Xi Jinping has like kind of when Xi Jinping came to the power. So they have moved, like they call it now, it's called like Chiang Chi Lai, like kind of like Chang Chi Lai, Fu Chi Lai, and then you have Chiang Chi Lai. That means like when the China was established, they call it China was established in 1949, and then the Mao gave a speech called Chinese people have stood up against the various powers, right? And then during the Deng Xiaoping, the Chinese become prosper, like rich. So they call it like Chinese have become rich, prosper. Now under the Xi Jinping, the slogan has added one more element, that is called China has become stronger, right? So once you are stronger, you have to show to the world that you behave like a stronger. and every other smaller country or the equal country are trying to reach to you.
In the context of India-China relations, is the backsliding of relations or the crisis of diplomacy because of the territorial disputes that we have on the border, or is it because of the growing assertiveness or the aggressiveness of China in the world order?
You are right. Like there are like various reasons for this downhill in India-China relationship. But what I call it like three-body problem. Three-body problem. You have like it's not only the border. You have earlier it was a Pakistan also. You have a Dalai Lama Tibet issues also, and at the same time you have also the two countries are in Asia, right? And it's never happened in the history of this world politics that the two neighbors are rising simultaneously, right? So both China is rising, India is emerging. So there is a kind of like you have a tussle for leadership. Now, if you go, let me go back a little bit further in history when Nehru was trying to become a leader of the third world and Mao was not ready to give, right? And I think there are some studies that highlight that one of the reasons that Mao wanted to kind of like teach a lesson to Nehru that Nehru was trying to become a leader of the third world or developing world, right? So this is also a kind of like a manifest that China is not ready or to share with this leadership with India. And if you have seen that India is rising, Indian engagement with the world has a kind of like multiplied in several fold. So and maybe because Chinese are not ready, they are saying that India is stealing all the limelight. So this is not a good way to kind of like promote Indian influence worldwide. So I would say that it's also a kind of crisis of Asian leadership, where the both sides are trying to kind of contest who is the leader of the Asia. So it's also not only the border, it's not only the Tibet or Dalai Lama, but it's also about the leadership.
But we see that India has always tried to like extend the hand of friendship and try to ensure that there are amicable relations between both the nations. And historically also we see that post independence India supported China's claim for the seat at United Nations Security Council. Why is there a lack of reciprocity from the Chinese side? Is it a part of China's worldview, or is it like in a particular context or particular relationship with India?
We, as you have mentioned, that we always say that we helped China to get into the United Nations Security Council seat, but the Chinese not accept, because they are saying that if you read the Chinese academy or Chinese literature, they would never accept that it was the India who helped. Right, because they say that they were the founding members of the United Nations Security Council, not the PRC, but the ROC, Republic of China. And it was when in 1970s when it was replaced the ROC to become the member of the UNSC. Right, even the nomenclature of, if you look at the United Nations Charter, there is no mention of People's Republic of China. It is still Republic of China. Right. So Chinese does not accept the fact that it was the India who pushed or helped to gain this seat. So there is no kind of like any reciprocity there. Now you also mentioned that India always like they were always a kind of like good relationship, right? Historically we had a because there were not much interaction except what the monks are traveling or the pilgrims from the Chinese side are coming to India, right? And then you had a not major war between India and China before 1962, but it was a kind of like you had one event, kind of like incident where the Chinese diplomat, when the Tang Dynasty king, is sent an emissary to India during the Harbhajan time, but known as Wang Xuanzi. But when he came here, he discovered that the king is dead, and someone else, the usurper, has kind of claimed the kind of throne. And then that person was like not so ready to accept the emissary, and then he also attacked them. And then you have seen that Wang Shunzhe went back. They came with the Tibetan army. Nepalese also supported them, right? So there is a kind of like, it's not a major war but you can say that it was a kind of like significant event in India-China relationship. So, and after that you have, like, we all know about how the Chinese, when Sang came to India, and from Indian we have Kumar Jiva, and then you have what they call like Bodhidharma, right? So they travel, monks travel. We also say that it is the Chinese Kung Fu is like the Indian yoga mixture of kind of like, right? So there's a kind of like, you have a positive image of India-China relationship. But I would say that, like, because the interaction was not much since now the globalization and all that happened, the interaction has kind of intensified. Now you have people-to-people contacts have gone up. The economic relationship between India and China is like more than like $100 billion, right? But of course there is a trade deficit that is not favorable to India. So I would say that that India-China relationship is not so kind of like not so much interaction but after 90 when the Rajiv Gandhi visited in 1988, and then you have this the relationship coming up again, and that is called India. I would call that India-China rapprochement, where you have now the trade relationship. It was like kind of like maybe 1 billion or something, and then you have now 100 billion. When Rajiv Gandhi met the Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, he met for like kind of like maybe 1.5 hours, and now Prime Minister Modi meeting Xi Jinping in Mamallapuram and then in Wuhan goes to like 600 minutes and so. But then again you have a crisis at the border where the standoff you have in Doklam, 73 days standoff, and then you have now in Ladakh that is like going on for years right now since 2000. So the relationship is kind of like is not balanced. I would say that it's a kind of like the crisis is there. One of the problem that I see in India-China relationship is that whenever major problems comes, then the both side try to kind of like reset the relationship, and I say it kind of like the India-China relationship has been trapped into this reset business. So the India-China relationship need to be kind of like overhauling the whole mechanism, because this mechanism has not proved to be a successful. So there is need to kind of you need to have again renegotiate some of the terms of engagement to looking forward of the relationship.
In the past decade and more, India has also been trying to improve its relations with the Western nations, particularly with the US, without also trying not to antagonize China by engaging in regional groupings led by China. How do you view this balancing act by India, and is it necessary?
I think it's like the interests have changed, right? In international relations say that there is only interest is permanent, right? So your interest is like kind of like changed, the friends changes, and then India is a member of both. China led, people say the China led SCU, or some of them also got BRICS, and then you have a Quad, you have Indo-Pacific, right? So India under, I think, Prime Minister Modi has kind of like moved from non-aligned to multi-aligned. What in Buddhism we'll call it like Madhyam Marg, right? You have to take the path that gives you or kind of like extract the maximum benefit, right? And this is the era like where you cannot afford to have a kind of like non-aligned. So meaning is like you align with everyone, but in the sense that you are aligned with none. Right, same thing. The purpose remains, but the only thing is that you have to serve your interest. So many call them like, there are scholars like from example like Professor T.B. Paul, who call is like India is trying to soft balancing China by in a group of SU also, and at the same time you are a member of Quad also. But some people are saying that India is hedging, right? Because India needs support from China at some forum, like for example like NSG, Nuclear Supplier Group, and China needs also help. Like you have seen that India like vehemently opposed Belt and Road Initiative. So I would say that it's a very fine balancing, because you cannot antagonize both the powers, right? And being a developing country, being a aspiring great power, you have to have extract maximum power, and you can't do that by antagonizing any of them. So I would say that it's a very fine balance. I think our leaders are mature enough to frame a policy. Of course, the academia would say otherwise, but I think it's a fine balancing of being in both the camp at the same time. Because if you leave that any of the camp, then you don't know what is happening inside those camp, and you won't be able to influence the policy outcome. Right? For example, if India is not a member of SCO, and suppose there are other members like try to oppose India's any policies or any move, then India would not be able to oppose that, right? So I think India is doing good in being in both the camp.
In the recently concluded BRICS summit, 6 new members were included, and many commentators and analysts have claimed that this is a show of strength by China. Is that something you would agree with? And on this point that India has to engage with China-led groupings also, so as to be able to manage the policy outcome. So how do you see this induction of new members for India?
I don't see it as a kind of like victory for China, right? Because if you look at the 6 members, the new members, India has a strategic partnership with all the members except Ethiopia, right? So one cannot say that it's say the Chinese are winning, and at the same time it's also given avenue, platform to India to engage more with the Ethiopia, right? China has also agreement, Belt and Road Initiative. All the 6 members are partners of China with the Belt and Road Initiative. But if you look at the membership criteria, right, even the India has to agree. So it's a kind of like consensus-based membership. So saying that it's a win for China, I would say that is a exaggeration. And then at the same time, you are underestimating the India's diplomacy, right? I would say that it's a kind of like fine balance with because it has to like expand. So BRICS, some say this is talking shop and whatever you would means say, but with the new development bank, that is a BRICS bank that has been rechristened as a new development bank. It's no longer a kind of like just a grouping. It has kind of like formalized in institutions. Now it has already like the NDB is trying to disperse kind of like $300 billion of grants and loans to the developing countries. So in a way, it's a kind of like, I would say that this expansion of this BRICS is a kind of solidifying the identity of the global South. I would also not say this is against the West, because India is a member there, and India is not against the West. So one can't say that it's against West, and one should also not call it as like it's a China-led, because then you are undermining the role of India in that. You are undermining the role of Brazil. You are undermining the role of South Africa, right? So why, like, I don't understand like why people say that it's a China-led, because it's equal member, right? Equal membership is there. Even though the NDB is based in Shanghai, the first president of NDB was the Indian, and now it's led by the Brazil. So and China doesn't have any upper role in deciding the NDB businesses, right? It's a kind of like equal stakeholders. So I would say that it's a kind of like, when you call it like exaggerate that okay, it's a China-led or it's the win for China, then you are undermining the Indian diplomacy. And I would say that we should not do that. We should kind of like promote what India is doing. Of course, there is a kind of like, since it's strengthening the global South identity, there would be a lot of negative voices coming from the other part of the world, because it's a kind of like put against the Western world, right? But again, there are like lot of Western countries are trying to become member of the BRICS, right? So then again, one will say that okay, again is the win of China. I would not say that. I would say that it's a kind of like a global South grouping, and India has equal role to play, and one should not kind of like negate the role that India is playing in NDB and in the BRICS.
True. In the changing world order, how far apart are India and China placed, and who are their friends and what are their strategic strengths, you would say?
This is a difficult question to answer because deciding who are your friends, I think it's really tough. Like in international relation, it's one is your interest, right? That defines your friendship. Your friends change it. Like we have seen that US has become now our close allies, right? Partners. Gone the days when we were not even kind of trusting the United States, Washington, right? So because of the interest has changed, right? We need many partners, right? And so does the friendship. China is also trying to expand its friend circle, right? One Belt and Road Initiative was one such initiative to bring many countries from the global south to kind of like to ally or kind of like to forge a partnership with China, right? India is also trying to do that. India is also like helping a lot of countries in global south, from our neighborhood to the extended neighborhood to now we are going far away to like Latin American countries, also in African countries also, because we need support, right? This international politics, if you want to influence or become a part of global decision making that we are trying to do, right? For example, from G20 we are trying to become a member of United Nations Security Council. And if you remember, let me recall back, like when you say that BRICS expansion, Prime Minister Modi remarked that it's also like, no, we have now expanded the BRICS, the world should also give due representation in the United Nations Security Council. So it says that no, it's a time to kind of like reflect the today's reality rather than stuck into the Cold War era, right? So I would say that both countries, India and China, both are trying to expand its friends, trying to influence, and then I think there are limited set of countries, right? So and there is going to be a class that who's friend, but I think now the countries, even the smaller powers, are smart enough to extract the maximum benefit from both of. We don't have to go very far. Look at the South Asia. The South Asian countries are trying to extract a maximum benefit from both China and India, right? So both are trying to. So looking at from the world order perspective, I think I would say that there are like different views of the world order from the Indian side and from the Chinese side. The Indian side would would be continuing with this liberal world order, but at the same time reform in the mechanism, right, in the system. Chinese side would like to have this, what they call it, international order rather than the world order. They believe that this world order is based on dollar and military allies of United States. They want to be like one of the Chinese diplomat scholar known as Fu Ying. She says that China would be happy to in the existing international relation under the United Nations rules and regulation, rather than happy in the world order that is led by US with the help of their dollar domination and the military ally. India would be happy, but India would like to have reform in many multilateral institutions to have its voices heard.
You have lived and taught in China for 9 years, right? Drawing from that personal experience, do you think there's scope for India's soft power to influence China and its people? And are there any divergent views from what is going on today in the international diplomatic circles? Are there like divergent views on how China should view and approach its neighbor?
There are of course, India has a kind of a huge soft power influence in China, but it's limited. The soft power is not kind of converted into something that is beneficial to India. India has a soft power like the Bollywood, the yoga, the Buddhism, and also the IT sector, because Chinese are very fond of Indian IT sector. But this only soft power is not capable to extract the maximum benefit, right? You cannot influence. So you need the both, the combination of a good combination of hard power and soft power for any, not for China only, for any country. But as you mentioned that India has this soft power, the only thing is that what I call it, like if you live in China, you talk with the normal Chinese people, they would be remembering the Raj Kapoor movie Awara Hoon, right? 1950s, and then you have a gap of like we had this limited war in 1962, and then you have from Raj Kapoor to then again now you have Amir Khan. So there is a huge kind of generation gap. I call it like lost generation in India-China relations, who doesn't have any very favorable memory or kind of like of India, because they had no connection. Now the young generation had this watching the Indian movies by the Amir Khan, like Dangal, Three Idiots, even Bahubali, right, and others movies also. And there are a lot of traveling. Chinese traveler be coming to India also, Indians are going there also. But again, this soft power has not been translated into something that helps India and China to kind of like resolve the border crisis. But I would say that even though you don't have this soft power playing any very crucial role in India-China relationship, there is a limited role. I would say that if you look at in Galwan, for example, like we were on the verge of having a war, right? But at the same time, you have people, Indian people living in Shanghai, in Hangzhou, in other part of the China, and Chinese people also living. So I think these are the, like you would have not imagined in 1962. Very few people, right? So this, I think this people to people contact also acts as a kind of like shock, kind of absorbs some of them, but at the same time, if something goes wrong, then they will have to burn the kind of like, right? So this soft power doesn't have much kind of, I would say that, impact or influence the foreign policy, as long as you have the main problem in India China, that is the boundary dispute remain unsolved. So as long as the border disputes are there, I would say that this India-China relationship would be, I think, kind of like trapped into the reset. You have something, some border problem, then again you have go to reset. We wait for some leaders to visit, and then again, kind of like a start from the zero again, scratching from again. Like, so that would, I would say that the crux of India-China relationship is now stuck with the boundary problem.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Heena.